So, starting right where we left off, the Yankees just traded for Giancarlo Stanton, filling really the only hole left on the roster in the DH position. And even with the Yankees eating a ton of Stanton's salary, they were under the luxury tax threshold that year, importantly resetting the table for a potential couple-year span where the Yankees could live well above the threshold. And with a fairly good roster top down, the rest of the Yankees offseason consisted of a couple of minor moves at the time to move pieces around. And with the ever-apparent need for bullpen help, they would make a trade with the Marlins for Michael King, sending over a couple of young depth pieces in Garrett Cooper and Caleb Smith. They would also trade Chase Headley back to the Padres, re-sign CC Sabathia to a one-year deal, and trade for depth infielder Brandon Drury in a three-team trade to add more competition at the third base position, trading over Nick Solak in the process. With the star talent already there, both in the lineup, rotation, and bullpen, little would have to be done in the offseason following the Stanton trade, and Cashman set his sights towards the future with withholding the rest of his financial assets, making sure his young talent had all arrived before going all in, presumably for the loaded 2019 free agency class, consisting of Harper, Machado, and Corbin, and a ton of other stars to make this team incredible. Going into the 2018 season, there was a ton of optimism regarding the team, because the majority of the 2017 team's success was built off the backs of young rookies who still had room to grow. At the time, it wasn't far-fetched to say that the Yankees had the brightest future in all of baseball. They would be adding more talent and top prospects on top of the players who were expected to improve. And as for the 2018 season, it looked more and more like that future was going to come into fruition as it progressed. They ended up winning 100 games, their best record since 2009, off the backs of an all-around great team. Their offense was the second best in the American League, led by Aaron Judge, who, although he had to miss 2 months after getting hit by a pitch, was incredibly productive when he was on the field, with a 150 OPS+. Giancarlo Stanton hit 38 home runs with 100 RBIs, and Didi Gregorius and Aaron Hicks saw their power numbers surge to career highs. As for their young players, their prized prospect Gleyber Torres impressed in his rookie season, hitting .271, .340, .480 with 24 home runs, finishing third in Rookie of the Year voting that year, while Miguel Andujar was the surprising breakout player, slugging .527 with 27 home runs to look like a staple for the Yankees at third base. And on the pitching side, even though Domingo Germán struggled, Jordan Montgomery needed Tommy John, and Luis Severino regressed from his excellent 2017 season, the pitching as a whole was very good, led off the backs of Sabathia, Tanaka, and newly acquired pitchers J.A. Happ and Lance Lynn. And as per usual, the bullpen was excellent. Chapman, Chad Green, Betances, and newly acquired Zach Britton were all excellent for them, and a great team everywhere you looked. There's no wonder why this team won 100 games in a tough division, with the only real knock being the lack of a high-end ace in their rotation. And with the team clearly capable of winning that year's World Series, Cashman went right to work on upgrading this team come the trade deadline. Given the struggles of his young pitchers, Cashman worked to upgrade his pitching depth, trading a duo of prospects twice for middle-of-the-rotation starters Lance Lynn and J.A. Happ from the Twins and Blue Jays respectively. They would also do another trade in the division, acquiring Zach Britton for Cody Carroll, Dylan Tate, and Josh Rogers, making what was already a strength in their bullpen even better. Furthermore, at the time, the package was not deemed to be too great, although Tate has since established himself as a force in the Orioles' bullpen. A couple more trades would also be done, although most of the focus was around their pitcher deals. First, they would trade cash for Blue Jays depth option Gio Urshela. Next, they traded for Cardinals depth piece first baseman Luke Voit, with the goal of him competing with the struggling Greg Bird for the position. This season, it actually worked out amazingly for the Yankees, as Voit would hit 14 home runs in only 39 games, showcasing his elite power potential. And they would also trade for Andrew McCutchen, eating up most of the salary from the Giants in return for a lesser package. And although trades ate up depth and graduations reaped its harvest, the farm system still had some pieces, although definitely was not the powerhouse that it was when it still had Judge, Sanchez, Gleyber, Severino, and Montgomery. Nonetheless, the farm was quickly at work supplanting the newest wave of talent from their deep farm system. Clark Schmidt, their first-round pick in 2017, was taken along slowly, but he did pitch to a 3.08 ERA in limited action in the lower levels of the minor leagues. Justice Sheffield, the other top prospect acquired in the Andrew Miller trade, and the top prospect pitching-wise in the Yankees organization, looked like a potential ace in the making, pitching to a 2.48 ERA across Double and Triple-A, making his major league debut near the end of the season. Even further down, Everson Pereira made his professional debut in rookie ball, beginning to get acclimated to life in the United States, and little-known signee Luis Gil, who was traded for Jake Cave a year prior, would impress in the lower levels of the minors, pitching to a 1.96 ERA in 12 starts. Although in the 2018 draft class they would strike out, they would make up for it by signing Kevin Alcantara, one of the top prospects during the international signing period. And although they would lose to the Red Sox in the ALDS after winning the one-game wildcard, with the main culprit being the lack of a high-end starter, the Yankees still had a ton of years of control over their top assets, and still had a good enough farm system to make more moves and enough money to make a couple splashes in this loaded 2018-2019 signing class. Yankees fans at the time dreamed that they would be able to sign Bryce Harper, with Harper being surrounded in rumors to the Yankees right until he signed his massive deal to go to Philadelphia. There were also rumors that they would pursue Patrick Corbin in light of the Yankees' struggles with starting pitching. Ultimately, though, it was the Yankees' decision to trade for Giancarlo Stanton last offseason that hampered their ability to sign any of these top guys this season. With the Stanton trade, they are already pressed up against the luxury tax, and despite resetting the penalty by being under in 2018, Harper and Corbin both wanted long-term deals, and signing them would not only put them well over the luxury tax, making any deal worth about 50% more in penalties, but it would also hamper them for the next decade and beyond due to the lack of financial assets, making it tough for them to re-sign their developing talent when they hit free agency. So once again, Cashman would work through the trade market and sign shorter deals to retool his roster, while waiting for his money to reopen up to acquire another star. He would re-sign a lot of his expiring free agents to 1 or 2 year deals, effectively matching the timeline as to when more money would be opening up after the 2020 season. He would re-sign Sabathia, Gardner, Britton, and Happ to 1 or 2 year deals, and sign DJ LeMahieu for infield depth and Adam Ottavino for the bullpen. For the rotation, he would trade top prospect Justice Sheffield, Eric Swanson, and Dorian Thompson-Williams for Mariners ace James Paxton, acquiring another high-end starter, and cut salary by trading the now expendable Sonny Gray to the Reds for Shed Long Jr. While not going all in, Cashman made a bunch of moves to make the team better in the long run, with a timetable of around 2020 to truly go all in with this team. With roughly the same team that won 100 games just a year prior with a couple of additions, plus a lot of their core pieces still being in their mid to early 20s, there was, as per usual, a ton of optimism going into the 2019 season, and they did not disappoint. For the first time since 2012, the Yankees won their division, winning 103 games along in the process. And although their pitching as a whole regressed, with James Paxton being the only pitcher to have an ERA under 4, offense as a whole spiked in 2019, and the rotation was actually slightly better than average when you looked at their weighted stats. Nonetheless, they were once again carried by their elite hitting and bullpen again, although cracks were beginning to form to their once unshakable core assembled in 2017 and 2018. For starters, injuries to his arm and leg limited Stanton to just 18 games, causing the Yankees to trade for Edwin Encarnacion, who actually played very well in his limited time with the Yankees. Luis Severino's elbow tear costed him the 2019 season, and Miguel Andujar regressed heavily from his breakout 2018 season to lose his starting spot, and Didi Gregorius' power and contact abilities did decrease. However, this team did win 103 games, so of course there are more positives than negatives. Aaron Judge once again got hurt for around a month or two, but was elite when healthy, with a 910 OPS in 102 games. Gary Sanchez, after a rough 2018 that saw his batting average dip below 200, rebounded by hitting 34 home runs, although the strikeouts from the previous season were still there. DJ LeMahieu impressed in his first season, hitting 327, and depth pieces Gio Urshela, Mike Tauchman, and Luke Voigt all took over the struggling Yankees before them and played very well, with OPSs all above 840, earning them a starting spot on this roster, and contributing to one of the best and deepest offenses in all of baseball. And once again, the bullpen was excellent, with Ottavino flawlessly joining Chapman and Britton to form a lethal combo. However, Dylan Betances would suffer shoulder injuries that took him out for most of the season, and tragically would suffer a torn Achilles upon returning, a huge blow to the pen. With very few holes still in this roster to begin with, and a farm that was still recovering from an overhaul of its system for the past couple of years, Cashman made no major trades at this deadline, and moved that he may have regretted, seeing as how they lost in the ALCS in 6 games despite holding the Astros to 4 runs or less in 4 of their games. The Astros pitching dominated the Yankees in this series. Garrett Cole, Zach Greinke, and Justin Verlander made sure that the Yankees could never get any momentum going, and the breakout players that made this team so deadly this season disappeared in this series, with Urshela, Encarnacion, Sanchez, and Aaron Hicks all combining for just 10 hits and 74 plate appearances, and the Astros would walk off the Yankees in Game 6. And in the loaded 2019 MLB draft, the Yankees would not come out empty-handed despite having such a low pick. They would select Anthony Volpe with the 30th overall pick and select Josh Smith and Ken Waldichuk in the middle rounds, also signing the top international free agent in Jason Dominguez during this time period as well, adding some star power to a farm system that was bolstering with low-end talent and depth pieces. If the 2019 playoffs shows anything, it shows that elite starting pitching can carry a team throughout the playoffs, as shown by both the Nationals and the Astros. For the Yankees to not have an ace of their own, much less more than one ace, has been the reason for their downfall in these past 2 postseasons. Whether due to injuries, regression, or a lack of development, the Yankees have never had a frontline starter in their rebuild. So the main goal in the 2019-2020 season would be to acquire the bull in the rotation, and they did just that, signing Garrett Cole to a massive 9-year, $324 million contract. And based on the way he pitched in the 2019 season and in the playoffs, Cole looked to be worth every penny on signing and immediately become the head of the rotation that the Yankees desperately needed. With a 2.5 ERA in the 2019 season and 326 strikeouts, Cole was worth around $60 million in the 2019 season. For the Yankees to be paying him around $35 million a year, Cole is an easy bargain, even if his production drops off just a little bit. And with the main goal of the offseason taken care of with the Garrett Cole signing, the rest was really just housekeeping. They re-signed Brett Gardner, who has still been a productive player as he aged, and money-wise, they are now well above the luxury tax for the time being. But expiring contracts over the next couple of years, like Ellsbury, Tanaka's, Chapman's, and now Brett Gardner's, should relieve the Yankees and allow them to reset their luxury tax thresholds or re-sign their core pieces. Not that it really matters anyways though, as the Yankees have the capital to live well above the luxury tax for a long time. The 2020 season saw the Yankees go 33-27. However, this season was much more volatile than the comfortable playoff spot would have implied. This team was incredibly hot and cold. Where every game is precious, they would go on multiple streaks of losing 4 games or more, counteracted by 2 6-game win streaks and a 9-game win streak to go along with that. This team's volatility continued in their lineup, especially among their core pieces. Once again, Aaron Judge suffered an injury, this time a calf strain, that took him out for around half the season, but he was incredibly productive when healthy. Gary Sanchez reverted back to his 2018 form, where his batting average was below 200, and Gleyber Torres saw his OPS drop nearly 150 points from his previous season and suffered a hamstring injury. That being said, the Yankees had the best offense in the American League, and nearly everyone else comfortably picked up the slack for them. DJ LeMahieu once again raked, finishing third in MVP voting with a 1.011 OPS. Luke Voit led the league in home runs at 22, and Stanton, Hicks, Gardner, and Urshela all played at an all-star level. However, the real surprise here was Clint Frazier. Once a top prospect, Frazier struggled to get playing time in the crowded outfield in the 2018 and 2019 seasons. However, with the injury to Judge opening up a spot, Frazier thrived, hitting .267, .394, .511 for a .905 OPS, finally living up to his potential. And on the pitching side, things were perhaps just as hot and cold. Garrett Cole was everything the Yankees wanted him to be, staying healthy, pitching to a 2.84 ERA in 12 starts, and J.A. Happ and Masahiro Tanaka were both solid middle-of-the-rotation starters, although they did have their rough outings. However, outside of the two, there were a lot of struggles regarding their young pitchers. Montgomery, returning from injury, Deivi Garcia, and Michael King all struggled, and Paxton along with them. Their pitching was once again the reason for them getting bounced in the playoffs, with Cole limiting the Rays batters to just 4 runs in 11 innings, but Tanaka and Happ both lost their starts, and the offense went quiet in Game 5 for them to lose the series. With so much turmoil and no real suitable trade for starting pitchers, the Yankees would be quiet again on the 2020 trade deadline. And with no minor league season, this gave a lot of Yankees young prospects a chance to play at the alternate training site against older depth pieces. I think that this benefited the Yankees farm system a little bit more than most, as extremely young prospects like Jason Dominguez could face off against older pitchers, gaining more valuable experience that would help them out in the long run. The same thing goes for their other young players like Volpe and Heel, and in the 2020 draft they would select Austin Wells, who despite being drafted a year later than most of the other young pieces, could quickly join the team as an offense for his catcher. Although this did show that the Yankees did not see Gary Sanchez as the franchise catcher he initially showed himself to be. With Tanaka, Ellsbury, and Paxton all going off the books, the Yankees would have increased money to spend in this offseason, where the goal would be to acquire more pitching depth and increase the stability of this offense. For starters, they re-signed DJ LeMahieu, and a move they really had to do regarding their infield stability and the fact that he'd been their best player over the past 2 years. They did the same with Brett Gardner, and also signed Darren O'Day for more added pitching depth in the bullpen. As for the promised pitching depth in the rotation, though, they signed Corey Kluber to a 1-year deal, Nestor Cortez for pitching depth, as well as traded Miguel Yajuri, Roansy Contreras, Macaulay Scotto, and Canaan Smith and Jigba to the Pirates for Jameson Taillon. They would also trade Ottavino to the Red Sox in a salary dump. And with these moves, the Yankees got a lot younger in their rotation, while not really losing any key guys as well. An offseason that was received pretty highly by most Yankees fans, although some did want to see them pursue a Lindor trade instead of re-signing LeMahieu, but they didn't really have the farm at the time to make that trade. Record-wise, they did take a step back from their excellent 2018 and 2019 seasons, finishing 92-70 and second in the AL wildcard spot. But the team as a whole was still solid, and although the volatility continued regarding their depth pieces, the stars remained. Aaron Judge in large part posted his healthiest season since his rookie year, finishing 4th in MVP voting with 39 home runs and a 149 OPS+. And Giancarlo Stanton and Garrett Cole both continue to be cornerstones in the lineup and rotation. The team also had some breakout stars in their rotation like Nestor Cortez, who earned himself a starting role by pitching to a 2.9 ERA across his season, and Jordan Montgomery, who returned from Tommy John to post a 3.88 ERA across 30 starts. Jonathan Loaizaga in the bullpen, who was a depth piece for them, who pitched to a 2.17 ERA in his breakout campaign, assisted the likes of Chapman and Chad Green, although Zach Britton did struggle mightily with injuries and underperformance this season. However, once again, their depth pieces began to break down. Glaber's 2021 season looked more like his 2020 season, as he uncharacteristically struggled with slugging the ball. Similarly, DJ LeMahieu took a step back, only hitting 10 home runs on the season after hitting as many in only 50 games the previous season. And Gio Urshela, Clint Frazier, and Brett Gardner regressed from their 2020 seasons. The best offense in the league last year was now last in batting average, showcasing how a deep lineup is needed in order to have a great offense, even if the stars are there and producing. This lack of lineup depth surrounding their stars was their downfall in the AL wildcard game, as despite home runs from their stars, Anthony Rizzo and Giancarlo Stanton, Gardner, Torres, Gallo, and Urshela combined for just one hit, and their only runs would come from 2 solo shots. And Cashman, realizing that his depth pieces around Judge and Stanton really weren't producing, made 2 huge trades which still have major league ramifications today. Trading for Joey Gallo and Anthony Rizzo, giving up some of their major depth pieces in Kevin Alcantara, Alexander Vizcaino, Glenn Otto, Josh Smith, Ezekiel Duran, and Trevor Hauver. Rizzo, one could argue, has worked out very nicely for the club, as he batted very well in his time in 2021. Although Gallo, who was having a very good year for the Rangers, playing excellent defense and getting on base a ton, struggled in his time with the Yankees for the remainder of his contract. They would also trade for Andrew Heaney to add more rotation depth outside of Cortez, Cole, and Montgomery. And as for their farm system, despite the losses of so many of their depth prospects in just 3 trades, through smart drafting and international signees, the system remained pretty strong. Dominguez made his professional debut, and while he was underwhelming, he showcased an advanced eye at the plate for someone so young. Pitchers Clark Schmidt and Luis Gil both impressed as they moved up in the minor league, showcasing impressive strikeout numbers and a propensity to limit runs. Austin Wells really impressed as a catcher with an 866 OPS, and Anthony Volpe broke out, becoming one of the top prospects in all of baseball by hitting 294, 424, 604 across single A and high A, showing his power speed there by hitting 27 home runs and stealing 33 bases in just 109 games. And in the 2021 draft, they would select Trey Sweeney and Brock Selvidge, and once again add in the signing period, signing Henry Lanane. And with a 2021 season that saw so much turmoil from a lot of their depth pieces, Brian Cashman's main goal was to retool his roster to prevent such a thing from happening again. And although he would be selling low on a lot of his pieces, he was right in the middle of his contention window, and cannot waste another prime year of Judge or Cole, hoping that his pieces would have a good year. With Anthony Rizzo being such a good fit with the Yankees following the trade, he was re-signed for the next 2 years to become the everyday first baseman, making 2020 home run leader Luke Voit expendable in the process. And as a result, he'd be traded to the Padres for Justin Lange. And with Gio Urshela having a very underwhelming season from the third base position, and Miguel Andujar having completely fallen out of favor after 3 straight disappointing seasons, Cashman traded Urshela, along with Gary Sanchez, for Josh Donaldson, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, and Ben Reutevedt, effectively upgrading the position on paper, as Donaldson had hit 26 home runs with a 127 OPS plus last season, although he would be entering his age 36 season. To acquire another catcher after trading what was once the future face of their franchise in Gary Sanchez away, they acquired Jose Trevino from the Rangers, trading Albert Abreu and Ronnie Alstor. To cap off this busy offseason, they would also dump Tyler Wade to the Angels for cash and trade for Miguel Castro. And yet, in this busy offseason where they acquired so much, they didn't really trade a lot of their prospects. Most of the trades were depth pieces for depth pieces, and that the Yankees were able to keep their growing farm system intact, once again taking on contracts for a lesser haul. And for a large portion of the 2022 season, it really looked like Cashman's offseason moves all panned out for the most part. Donaldson, while he regressed from his amazing self in 2021, was still healthy and a decent contributor from the third base position, a nice stopgap. And while Trevino and IKF were not great with the bat, they provided defensive value at positions the Yankees were not used to having defensive stars for the majority of this current era. And while Gallo continued to struggle en route to a midseason trade, the stars picked up the slack. 2022 was the year of Judge. He won MVP this year, breaking the American League record for home runs with 62, and had a 10.5 WAR season and 1.111 OPS. Rizzo was also excellent as a slugging first baseman, hitting 32 home runs of his own with a good walk rate. Gleyber was solid, albeit not as good as his first couple of seasons, and Stanton continued to be his usual self, hitting 31 home runs, although his on-base abilities did take a hit. And while the lineup as a whole was not as deep as it usually was, Judge was almost single-handedly carrying what was a top 5 offense in baseball that season. The pitching, meanwhile, was the best it's possibly ever been. Cole did take a step back, but was still the workhorse ace that he is. Nestor Cortez had his best season yet, becoming an all-star and posting a 2.44 ERA. And Taillon, Domingo Germán, and Montgomery, who would be traded for Harrison Bader at the trade deadline, all improved. And Luis Severino returned from his injuries that took him out for nearly 3 seasons to post a nice 3.18 ERA in 19 starts. And as for the bullpen, Clay Holmes took over as closer following Chapman's struggles, and him, along with Lucas Luque and Wandy Peralta, locked down a great, although perhaps not as dominant as usual, pen. And with a top 5 offense in baseball and a top 5 pitching staff, they won 99 games, first in their division and only behind the juggernaut Houston Astros in the American League. And despite 3 trades, one for Frankie Montas sending over top prospects Ken Waldichuk and Luis Medina, for Scott Elfrost sending over Hayden Wesneski, and for Andrew Benintendi sending over some more farm system depth, the farm system continued to stay steady, a result of continued development from some of their top guys. Anthony Volpe, now a bona fide top prospect, while he did see his rate stats drop a little bit as he moved through the upper levels of the minor leagues, stole 50 bases and hit 21 home runs, showcasing his power speed threat against older competition while still playing great defense. And Jason Dominguez broke out. At just 19, he had an 805 OPS across 3 levels, moving all the way up to AA. Volpe and Dominguez's rise to top prospect status is very reminiscent of Gleyber and Judge's at one point before. And outside of the two, Austin Wells posted an 897 OPS, moving all the way up to AA, becoming a top catching prospect in all of baseball. Oswald Peraza made his debut as a depth middle infielder to pretty good results, batting over 300 for the Yankees, and Oswaldo Cabrera slugged over 500 in the upper levels of the minor leagues to warrant a major league call-up as well. And on the pitching side, Clark Schmidt pitched well enough to make a spot on the team as a reliever, and Luis Gil, while injured, pitched in AAA. The newest wave of prospects was just around the corner, en route to make an impact on an already great team with superstars, adding more once again, filling in the depth that was desperately needed this season. And in the 2022 draft, they would do extremely well, selecting not only Spencer Jones, who was now a top prospect, but also Drew Thorpe, a very solid starting pitching prospect, albeit now for the White Sox. And while this team was great, the team, at least offensively, was carried by Judge's production, meaning that where Judge goes, the team goes. The Astros knew this, and by limiting Judge to just 1 hit in 16 at-bats, they were able to stymie the Yankees' offensive potential as a whole, leading to a relatively quiet sweep at the hands of the Astros. The 2022-2023 offseason was going to be an interesting one, given how the Yankees clearly needed added depth, but they had a ton of young talent that needed to be implemented as well, especially regarding that middle of the infield with Volpe, Peraza, and Cabrera. And while it was very quiet in terms of retooling the roster compared to the past couple of years, it was not quiet overall. Aaron Judge, after it seriously looked like he was going to sign with the Giants, re-signed with the Yankees on a massive 9-year, $360 million deal. They would also re-sign Anthony Rizzo to a 2-year deal and added pitching depth behind Cole, as they implemented Carlos Rodon with a 6-year deal and Tommy Kahnle to the bullpen. However, the lack of activeness in this offseason regarding the lineup side reflected in how much faith Cashman had in his young guys to make a big impact on the 2023 season. Unfortunately, the 2023 season was a disaster by all accounts. The team finished 82-80 for 4th place in the daunting AL East and snapping their 6th-game playoff streak in the process. The young players, who Cashman decided were good enough to not address the offensive ineptitude regarding their depth in the offseason, really underperformed expectations, leading to too much burden having to be placed on their superstar Aaron Judge, and the team really had the same issue in their lack of depth around him, except Judge's monster season was derailed this time because of injury. While he did have to miss time with a toe injury, the team went from 10 games over 500 when he left to 2 games under 500 when he returned. Mass regression, underperformance, and injuries were the theme of this season. Gleyber was one of the only bright spots, having his best season since 2019, hitting 28 home runs. However, Rizzo, IKF, LeMahieu, Stanton, Trevino, Bader, and Donaldson all struggled mightily this season, and the youngsters were not enough to carry the team. Volpe posted a 2020 season and played excellent defense at shortstop, winning the Gold Glove, but struggled at making consistent contact, and the rest of the young players, Peraza, Cabrera, and Wells, were all underwhelming in their first stint in the Yankees. And although Dominguez played the latter half of the 2023 season, he tore his UCL and required Tommy John surgery, keeping him out a good portion of 2024 as well. The pitching was much the same way. Cortez regressed heavily from his excellent 2021 and 2022 seasons, posting an ERA above 4 and dealing with injuries. Severino also regressed heavily in his last season with the Yankees, posting an ERA above 6, and Rodon struggled with injuries on underperformance to an ERA above 6 as well. Once again, Cole was the only viable starter. However, the bullpen was, as per usual, pretty good, with Clay Holmes having cemented his closer role, Wandy Peralta remaining an excellent setup man, and Michael King showing promise as both a reliever and starter. But overall, this team had so many things that could go wrong for them, and Cashman looked to flush this season and just move on to the next one. Going into the offseason, there were still a ton of people that had high hopes for the 2024 season. At the end of the day, they were still a team that finished above 500, and that was with an injury to their best player for an extended period of time, plus a ton of negative regression that should offset itself in the 2024 season. That being said, it was now realized that Stanton could not be the second star next to Judge, and another one had to be acquired to not only help Judge when he was on the field, but also make sure a slide like that would never happen again with Judge off the field. They should also get depth, preferably in the outfield or starting pitching, since the prospects outside of Volpe looked like fringe depth pieces at best, and should be at least given competition for an everyday role. Well, Cashman went right to work in a busy offseason with a burgeoning farm system at his disposal. He traded for Alex Verdugo, adding his depth outfielder to pair alongside Judge, and more importantly traded for superstar outfielder Juan Soto to add the last outfielder to that trio, sending over a pretty good but not great haul of Drew Thorpe, Michael King, Randy Vasquez, Johnny Brito, and backup catcher Kyle Higashioka. Once again, the Yankees get value here because they believe that they can have Soto for the long term, while the Padres get less value given that Soto is on the last year of his contract. Yet, they were not done. They signed Marcus Stroman and Luke Weaver for pitching depth, as well as made 2 separate trades with the Dodgers for Victor Gonzalez and Caleb Ferguson for added relief depth. And now that Judge finally got his second star, there were high hopes for the 2024 season. Really, following the Yankees' trend of constant volatility over the last couple of years, everything that went wrong during the 2023 season would be a huge strength of the 2024 season. They're on pace to win about 107 games, and are implementing the most recent wave of star prospects like Volpe, Cabrera, and Dominguez, when he comes back healthy, into their core of Judge, Soto, and Stanton. The only real negatives have been Rizzo and Torres, but all around them, the lineup, rotation, and bullpen all look incredibly stacked, with reinforcements waiting in the wings and a farm system that has the ability to make trades going into the deadline. Judge has remained healthy, and after a slow start to the season has raked following that, posting an OPS plus of 213, looking like the MVP frontrunner in the American League. Soto hasn't been far behind him, walking more than he struck out, also with an OPS above 1,000 and an OPS plus of 183. Volpe, after struggling to make consistent contact last season, has seemingly fixed that issue, and still with elite defense, has become a much more complete player. Stanton has remained healthy and is hitting the ball harder than he has in years, and even Trevino has become much more competent with the bat, with a hard-hitting Austin Wells behind him at catcher, although there are some concerns about Trevino's throwing arm. And while the hitting has been some of the best in the league, the pitching has been just as good, even with Garrett Cole missing the first couple of months of the season and Clark Schmidt missing a big chunk of the season with a lat strain. Cortez and Rondon have both rebounded with 3.3 ERAs respectively, and Marcus Stroman has been every bit what the Yankees signed him for with a 3.08 ERA. And Luis Gil has been the breakout player for the Yankees, pitching like an all-star after struggling for the previous couple of seasons in the upper levels of the minor leagues. The bullpen has been, as per usual, excellent, with Holmes being the primary closer, backed up by Luke Weaver and Ian Hamilton. Yet, they still have reinforcements waiting in the wings. As I said before, Garrett Cole has been out for the majority of the season and is now just coming back, and we know how valuable he can be as the head of the rotation. They also have Jason Dominguez, who has superstar potential, also waiting in the wings, ready to come back when he's healthy, and Everson Pereira, a utility outfielder with a developing bat. These players represent the newest wave of Yankee prospects, and with hope they can become the next Judge, Sanchez, and Torres. And yet, as we speak, they're developing the very next wave, hoping to come around the 2027 season. Through the draft and international signees, they developed a very nice core. Spencer Jones at 6'6" has every bit looked like the power-hitting bat that scouts expected him to be, and he can be a left-handed hitting Aaron Judge in the outfield if all works out. Roger Arias, a toolsy shortstop signed in the 2022 period, has all the makings of a quality third baseman if everything breaks right. Same goes for 2023 first-rounder George Lombard Jr. and 2023 international signee Brando Mejia in the outfield. And as for the pitching, Brock Selfridge, a middle-round pick in 2021, has impressed in his time in the minor leagues and could be a nice depth piece. Chase Hampton broke out in 2023 with a 3.63 ERA and 20 starts across high and AA, and Henry Lanane is a 6'7" lefty with a high 90s fastball. With these prospects, it can clearly be seen how the Yankees are doing the same thing that they've been doing for these past couple of years, rebuilding on the fly. And now that they have what could be the most encouraging team in the majors out of all of them, while still holding on to that same philosophy of developing their late-round draftees and picking quality international signees, it could be said that the Yankees not only have one of the best teams right now, but also a very quality future ahead of them, unfazed by the twists and turns of baseball, able to develop a farm in waves to always keep a team competitive, no matter what hand they're given. Looking back, not only have the Yankees made the playoffs in what will likely be 7 of their last 8 years, but they also have effectively built the next wave of prospects through late-round draft picks and smart international signees, while also having enough depth in store to make the trades that have built a large portion of this team today. With this part of the rebuild over, I think that the Yankees' development staff shines a lot more than the financial assets that they showcase. Of course, they've not been shy with splurging, signing Garrett Cole, DJ LeMahieu, Anthony Rizzo, and Carlos Rodon, but they've also had a lot of their talent grow naturally through late-round draft picks and international signees like Volpe and Heel. And while they've supplanted a lot of their homegrown talent with stars acquired financially, they have been really impressive with their homegrown players, with even more on the way. Thank you